Good evening. The Design Review Board 2 public meeting of September 24th, 2009 is called to order. Please refrain from talking amongst yourselves during the meeting, and please turn off or put on vibrate all cell phones and pagers. If you need to talk, please leave the meeting room. Anyone who wishes to speak, including applicants, is asked to completely fill out one of the speaker's cards provided at the table by the front door and submit it to staff. You will be called to present a case or speak on a specific item as desired. Anyone who wishes to be re-noticed about a project must completely fill out one of the speakers or one of the postcards provided at the table by the front door and submit it to staff to be re-noticed of subsequent meetings. Current DRB agendas are available by calling our DRB hotline at 818-548-3171 or by visiting our website at www.ci.glendale.ca.us. A handout describing the procedures of the meeting, possible board decisions, and DRB reconsideration and appeals is available at the table by the front door. Please note that appeals must be filed within 15 calendar days of the DRB decision date. The chairperson may reorder agenda items at his or her discretion. This will be a roll call. Mr. Baladian?
Yes.
Mr. Garagos?
Here.
Mr. Malikian? Absent. Ms. Sakai?
Here.
And Mr. Zarifian?
Here.
Report regarding posting of the agenda. The agenda for this meeting was posted on the bulletin board outside City Hall at or before 5 p.m. on September 17th, 2009. Oral communications. Is there anybody in the audience that wishes to speak on an item that is not a part of this agenda? Do you have any? Are there any cards up there?
There are none.
Okay, great. We actually, Mr. Malikian is our chairperson. He is not here today, so we need to elect a pro tem.
Motion to have Mr. Garagos as the acting chairperson.
I second.
Okay, a motion to elect Mr. Garagos as the
See if it passes.
pro tem. Mr. Zarifian?
Yes.
Mr. Baladian?
Yes.
Ms. Sakai?
Yes.
Mr. Garagos?
Abstain.
We are down to our regular review calendar. We have no consent items. We have one item on the agenda tonight.
Okay. Welcome, one and all. We are going to go right into 2 PDR 2009-204-A, 900 West Glendale Boulevard. It's a new commercial building, first time review. Mr. Collins?
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, as mentioned, this is case number 1-PDR 2009-204A, located at 900 West Glen Oaks Boulevard. This is a first-time submittal for final review. The subject property is located on the southwest corner of Glen Oaks Boulevard and Highland Avenue. The site consists of 3 parcels totaling approximately 15,660 square feet. Commercial development is located to the north, east, and west of the subject property. The properties to the south, which is across the alley, are developed with single-family residential. Properties west of Alma Street and along Glen Oaks are zoned and developed with multifamily buildings. Commercial zones along West Glen Oaks have residential zones behind them. Currently, a vacant service station built in the 1960s is located on the subject site. The proposed project entails demolishing the existing service station and a construction of a new 2-story commercial mixed-use building with approximately 7,835 square feet of retail, approximately 4,600 square feet of offices. There will be 33 parking spaces located in a subterranean parking garage, and 12 will be located on grade and accessed off of the alley. The total floor area for the building will be 12,435 square feet approximately. An initial study for case number PEIF 2009-005 was conducted, and staff prepared a negative declaration for the initial study. A copy of the final negative declaration was attached to your packets, and in conjunction with any DRB decision, the board must adopt the negative declaration. The zone for the subject property is C2. It's in Height District 1. The subject site is located in the West Glen Oaks Boulevard neighborhood. The neighborhood is comprised of commercial and multifamily residential uses along Glen Oaks Boulevard, extending from Pacific Avenue westerly to the city boundary. The properties behind the commercial and multifamily uses are zoned R1 and are developed with single-family dwellings. The single-family zone is separated from the commercial zone, as mentioned before, and the multifamily zones by the alley. A landscape parkway separates traffic on Glen Oaks, which distinguishes this portion of northwest Glendale and provides a sense of identity. Typically, there are retail uses, commercial services, and multifamily developments along Glen Oaks Boulevard. Analysis of the issues discussed in the urban design guidelines are spelled out in the staff report. The Planning Department believes that the proposed commercial development will result in a well-designed shopping center meeting the intent of the guidelines and will be harmonious with the neighborhood's character subject to modifications. Therefore, the Planning Department recommends that the project be approved and subject to 9 suggested conditions or considerations. I would be glad to read through those if you would like.
Why don't you go through them quickly, just so we know the idea.
The first recommended condition is that the applicant submit a lighting detail for review and approval by staff prior to the building plan check submittal. Second, provide landscaping planters adjacent to the building facade facing Glen Oaks Boulevard or additional planters in the open space area, and I'll go through the plans in just a moment. The planter within the open space at the front shall have canopy trees to provide shading for the outdoor seating area. Fourth, the paving shall be decorative and permeable, subject to the approval of the planning staff. Fifth, the applicant shall submit an updated landscaping plan with drought-tolerant palette of trees and plants. Sixth, all planters should utilize drip irrigation in an effort to minimize water consumption. Seventh, the driveway leading to the subterranean parking garage shall be decorative, subject to the approval of the planning staff. Eighth, provide an additional material such as metal or another panel in place of the stucco at the northeast corner of the building. And ninth, locate all equipment, fire department connections, electrical meters out of view from Glen Oaks Boulevard and integrated into the building design. Also, staff would like to mention that we received an email from Ms. Daniela Freeman. Did I pronounce that right? And one other. I don't have my glasses, I'm sorry. In the letter there was, from Ms. Freeman, were several areas of concern, and staff has reviewed those and prepared responses, which I've left for each of you, and also some at the counter for the public. If you'd like, I can run through the plans real quick, give you a quick tour.
Sure.
And then staff will be available for any questions. Over here, starting at the top, we have the subterranean parking garage layout, showing the access coming off the back here, which includes the trash and recycle area, a lobby to get upstairs, as well as the electrical and mechanical room. Next, we have the site plan. Shows proposed building, curved shape toward the street, which has an open area or open space at the front, which has seating and a landscape planter. At the back, we have the 12 on-grade parking spaces with planters on either side, as well as a small planter here. And staff is recommending that the planter continue along Highland to provide more of a buffer to the building, as well as some additional planting or planters within the open space area. This also shows the floor plan of the proposed retail spaces on the first floor, and the second floor, which is the offices, connected by a common balcony walkway. Here we have a perspective looking to the southwest from Highland and Glen Oaks. Site plan, roof plan, colors material sample board. We have the colored elevations from Glen Oaks from Highland, from the alley, and then on the westerly side, which is next to the commercial building. Over here, we have the landscape plan, irrigation plan, and I've also provided a zoning map. And it gives you a layout of how the properties are within the surrounding area.
Do you have any side picture?
I'm sorry?
Do you have any picture? Oh, it's in the back.
Any other questions for staff?
Sorry. That concludes staff's presentation. I'm available for any questions.
Thank you. We'll go right to the public hearing. I have a card from the owner, Sam Manukian. Please state your name and your address.
Hi, my name is Sam Manukian. I'm a managing partner of NB Holdings. My address is 333 East Glen Oaks Boulevard. Thank you for the opportunity to address the board. This project has been many years in the making. One of the first things that we did before we even submitted anything to the city is we met with the Homeowners Association for the area, and we presented our plans to them. They, from my understanding, presented to the entire board and voted to support the project. We've tried to address any concerns there was, and they were, from my understanding, completely like the project and the way it was designed. I understand the only concerns that they had was the immediate property owners that were right next to the property, and I asked if there's any way we could address their concerns, and we were told that if we just eliminate the entire second floor, that would be their preference. Unfortunately, economics, that's not something that we could do, and we try to, and our height is, excuse me, no higher than the property next door to it, and we're not asking for any variances, we're not asking for any conditional use permits. We've tried to stay within the code. I personally think, and also do a lot of people, that this will be a substantial improvement to the area. Several years ago, we were the ones that did the project across the street. That was the Sidewalk Cafe, which I think that also improved the area fairly well. And at this stage, I'll go ahead and turn it over to our design team, and be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Any questions for the owner?
Thank you.
Thank you. I have a card from Karam. Oh, you want to go next? Okay, all right. John Poindexter, state your name and address, please.
Thank you and good afternoon. And also thank you, Brad, for your summary. My name is John Poindexter. With me is Cameron Wye. We are principals in the firm of Envirotecture, which is located at 3600 Wilshire Boulevard in Los Angeles. What we would like to do is first discuss our design approach to this project. We are the design architects. Talk about some of the program challenges that we had and how we responded to those challenges, with specific attention to some of the things that we think were successful solutions. And also respond to some of the concerns that were expressed by the staff in the staff report and the recommended conditions of approval. First, to talk about the approach. When our client came to us with a program, they wanted to provide a mixed-use building in this location, which they felt was important. This is a retail quarter, and it is zoned for retail use, but is also zoned for professional office buildings, and it was important to them to provide a range of activities and also a mix of both retail and professional office uses at the site. They also suggested to us this was a location that really should provide the proper street presence, especially at the corner of Glen Oaks and Highland, which they saw as a primary intersection and an identity intersection for this local neighborhood. There's an existing character of the commercial environment that we readily saw, and there are also a number of newer commercial enterprises that have been recently developed along Glen Oaks at this stretch. Importantly, they did not seek to max out the size and get as large of a project as they could at this location. What drives the size of this project, really, in this case, is parking. And one of the solutions, of course, is subterranean parking, and that, more than anything else, drives the size of the project. And lastly, they felt very important that there needed to be good public access. they saw and expressed to us that this was a good location for public access. There was good pedestrian activity along Glen Oaks Boulevard, and they wanted to enhance and also capitalize on that pedestrian activity. When we started looking at it, we saw a number of constraints. One, we saw that this was a block in transition. When you go west of Alma, the character transitions from a commercial character to a multifamily residential character. That's important in our consideration, both in terms of the character of this building and also the fact that what happens to this building needs to be compatible, not only with various commercial activities, but residential activities to the left. We also saw the real strong need for some buffering. As Brad mentioned, to the immediate south across the alley is a single-family residential. And we are always very cognizant of the need to provide the appropriate types of protections for single-family residential when commercial projects are abutted, even when buffered already by an alley. And lastly, we were very concerned about the appropriate compatibility. The existing character of the commercial spaces along Glen Oaks Boulevard, especially the existing commercial buildings to the immediate west, were of concern to us. And we were also concerned that there be the appropriate commercial identity that was compatible with some of the other developments that we saw recently completed in the area. And then lastly, our firm has a track record and also a philosophy that there are no minor elevations. So we knew it was very important to us and also to our client to make sure that each of the building elevations was treated as a major elevation and was given its appropriate identity and had an appropriate response to what was in front of it or behind it or what kinds of activities it contained. Now let me talk about some of the solutions that we came up with. Regarding the compatible massing, our solution was to break the mass of this building into individual components. As you notice, there are two primary masses separated by a vertical shaft that's open to the air and a stairway to access the second floor and a passageway to access the parking at the rear. What that does is it breaks the mass of this building down into masses that are compatible with the existing commercial buildings to the immediate west. Instead of one large building, what we have is two individual masses, which are smaller scale, more pedestrian-friendly scale, and that was important to us. We split the parking between some surface parking and some subterranean parking. That was a solution that provided for, one, the opportunity to provide immediate parking adjacent to some retail uses and some long-term parking that was accessible to employees and the professional occupants up on the second floor of the building. This is a solution that was very important to us because it provided for the adequate amount of parking at the site, the ability to provide some a long-term flexibility in terms of changes in uses, but it also provided pulled the building back from the south edge where the single-family residences are. It provides a significant space buffer between the single-family residences and the commercial enterprises. Commercial enterprises, I said, or single-family residences is very sensitive to abutting commercial enterprises, and we intentionally pulled the building back to provide an additional buffer in that area. Also,
I'll give you some extra time because the owner was very quick, but if we could...
Okay.
Sure, thank you. Sure.
We provided some differentiation of uses. We were very careful in the selection of materials, and we provided a mix of materials, not only stucco, but also masonry and some metals discreetly used, primarily stucco and masonry. We were careful with our landscape palette. I point out that because of the subterranean parking, the entire landscaping is on a deck, and what that requires is that you build up the landscape planters so that you have sufficient soil for the landscaping. We provided appropriate decorative paving. One of the things that the color palette shows is the intent to provide in the public areas glass-impregnated concrete to provide a decorative treatment to those public areas. And the last, let me talk a little bit about the staff recommendation. We are in agreement. We think that staff has done an excellent job, and and broken down all the major issues. There are a few recommendations that we take exception to. One, the recommendation for permeable paving. As I pointed out, the project is on a concrete deck. That sort of negates the effect of providing for permeable paving. The suggestion that tree planters be provided essentially right outside the storefront, we see as a problem because it inhibits flexibility of the storefront, or right immediately adjacent to the existing planting area. As I indicated, in order to provide tree planters, you have to build up a planter, and that would interrupt the flow, as we see, of the walking area. And lastly, the change in the material of the portion at the northeast corner. We think that we've been sufficiently careful to provide changes in materials. We really do understand the importance of providing the appropriate material at that location. We looked at a lot of alternatives, and on the whole, we think that a change in stucco color and a change in the fenestration so that there is a punch window at that location instead of a ribbon window sufficiently differentiates that location so that the addition of a different material should not, in our opinion, be necessary. And lastly, I think that and we've responded, I think, to the community goals and also our client program and also the design parameters. And we think that, as it is a successful solution. And we have provided a model and an animation of the model that shows what this building would look like from the pedestrian perspective. Are we able to show that?
Not yet.
Yeah. It should be on the monitor.
I got like a model.
This is at the northwest corner, and it transitions east on Glen Elks and turns the corner on Highland. And this shows the various changes and differences in facade. And like I said, we've been very careful to provide each building facade its own character, all within the same palette of materials, including some very extensive use of masonry at discrete portions, especially on the south side, because that provides additional sound buffer. With that, that's my presentation. If there are any questions, my business partner, Cameron Arai, was also going to make a presentation, and perhaps we can deal with any questions after this presentation.
Thank you very much. I'll let him go on a little long, so if we can keep it a little tight, it'd be great. Cameron, and say your name and address.
Sure.
Thank you.
Cameron REI from Envirotecture. We are the architects of the project, 3600 Wilshire Boulevard, Suite 1402, 90010. I just want to thank the staff for their help and support during the design phase and submittal, and especially help with Stephanie. Her input was very crucial in what we have achieved so far, and we welcome her input all the time. We try to be sensitive to the residential use. At the other side of the alley, we, as John mentioned, we broke the mass and we had widened up the alley by 5 feet, even to have enough backup area for the parking spaces, which caused the 25 feet alley, which is going to improve the traffic flow over there. And I just want to thank you for giving us the opportunity to present.
One question. I noticed that the canopy on the north side, the long one, it says stucco. Hold on 1 second. It says stucco canopy with aluminum fascia.
Right.
So the aluminum fascia is only on the
face
thin
of it.
face.
Yeah, and it's going to
The
grab.
bottom is stucco.
Bottom would be stucco.
Okay.
Can I ask him a question?
You want a question?
I have questions. What's the reason, the height for the first finished floor? Where is the floor to finish floor? I have it like almost 18 feet. And
Right.
is there a reason? Why is the reason it's 18 feet floor to floor on the first floor?
Is it 18 or 15, I
It
believe?
looks like
It's 16.
it looks 8.
16.
Is it 16 or 8? Are you sure?
When you look at A3.01,
Hold on.
and look at the elevations.
16. It goes from
It's about 16 feet on it.
480 to
16 feet floor
496.
floor. And again, that's just intended to provide sufficient flexibility for an adequate retail ceiling height, plus the mechanical, electrical, and whatever equipment might occur above the ceiling, as well as the structural
It's
elements.
16 or 18?
16.
Look at the
Go from 480 to
3.01.
426.
Look at the elevation.
Well, it's intended to be 16 feet.
16 feet?
16 feet.
Because I'm reading 3.6, 8.6, and then 4 feet. That adds up to 18 feet almost, no? Am I wrong? I could be wrong.
16.
It's been a hot day.
12, 16, not 16.
16?
We
Yeah,
suggest
3.8 and
may need to check the dimensions there.
It's 16.
12 and 4,
Dimensions might
16.
be off, but it's
Hold on.
intended to be 16
8.
feet.
12 and 4, 16.
You're good.
I do have a question since you're both up. I don't know, the process of how this works, I might do wrong in terms of whether I have to talk to them once separately or how that works if I ask them a question. So I may do that incorrectly. I do have a couple things, and it was interesting how you all sort of touched on my question in a different way. The owner mentioned the property across the street, which I think was nicely done, the Sidewalk Cafe. I think it worked very nicely, scale-wise, pitched roof and all that kind of thing. And then you mentioned one of the things about your firm was that you were talking about that, how this is transitioning from commercial to residential, and yours is the least transitional of those two. So I'm just wondering how you see that, because I think if you put a second floor on the one across the street, you could see it as a transitional building from commercial to residential. I don't see yours as a transition, so I'm wondering how you see that and how this building, more specifically architecturally, how you see it transitioning.
Actually, maybe transition was the wrong word. Well,
And I'll let you out of the word. That's okay.
We see this block as, I intended to say that this block was transitional. It really is the edge of a commercial district.
Sure.
And when we look at the existing commercial buildings to the immediate west, they have a very commercial character. We looked at those early on to see if perhaps those has some residential features, and they don't. It is clear mid-century commercial. So in looking at this design of this building, we looked at it as being at the edge of a commercial district. You go to the east, and it is pure commercial for a good stretch. So we see it as a commercial building, clearly, not a transitional building. That's probably the wrong selection of words. But the commercial building at the edge of a commercial district.
And I appreciate that. And extemporaneously, you can say crazy things if I've done many times. But I do think there was a kernel that I think was interesting, because it's part of one of the questions I have about the building is that you're not trying to mimic the other buildings that are there, because you obviously wouldn't want to do that. But there is kind of a strength to the frontage and how it's treated, and this really makes a statement on the corner, which I think everybody should be allowed to do. I'm wondering if that's the statement in terms of kind of the language that's on that part of the street, and how there is kind of a low-key residential feel to that, even though there's a commercial zone, they're all sort of single-story. And like I said, the one across the street it's funny that the owner mentioned that, because that was one of my comments, was that it transitioned to a modern form, with a little, evoking a little bit more of where it was in terms of that. So I just wondering how you felt about that.
Yeah, again, we considered that very early on when we looked at the residential character to the west of Alma. We considered some roof forms which would be much more residential in character, some hip or some pitch roofers, and our design decision was, given the existing character of the commercial buildings to the immediate west of this site, we shouldn't try to emulate something that attempted to look.
And I completely understand that. Were there other ways that you could have handled the corner that you thought and maybe discarded?
We looked at a number of alternative solutions before we came to this, including tower elements, a number of negative space forms which would hold the corner. We thought that it was important not only for the building form, but also the courtyard, which we felt was an important feature of the building, to merge at the corner, and a tower would have interrupted that. A tower would have cut off this courtyard from the corner and made the courtyard more of an interior courtyard and semi-private space, as opposed to what this is intended to be, is a very public, open, and very publicly accessible space. Now, this is not the kind of space that a developer is going to be successfully able to come up and put up data later on. This is open and is part of the building program. So, like
Because
I
you've
said-
made such a strong second floor element there, I'm wondering how that, okay, that's fine. I think that's, any other questions for applicant or, okay. I don't have any other cards. Does anybody else want to speak on this? No one? Okay. I have a question, and since Tim isn't here, it's Stephanie. Can you speak a little bit to the design guidelines in terms of corners and how the intent of the ordinance, speaks to that? Is there any way you can sort of give a thumbnail of that in any way? I know I didn't give any prep time on that. I apologize, but
Brad, do you have a ready answer to that, or we can maybe take a few minutes?
take a few minutes, maybe. If you just think
ahead,
about it, we can
Stephanie.
discuss it.
Okay, we'll
Let Tim give a second for Tim to come back. Maybe we'll talk about another thing.
We'll just take a few minutes to remind ourselves of
Okay.
what the guidelines say, and then remind you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. Okay. Anybody want to take a shot? Ladies go last this time?
Thanks for last this
Yeah,
time.
ladies go last.
Yeah, I'm going first today.
You're on first today.
Overall, I like the design, but I have little concerns. I don't know how my colleagues. I'm starting the first, but I would like to hear before I make a final decision. But I have a few concerns about the location. I think it's a beautifully crafted design. I don't have a problem with that. We have a concern regarding the residential, that the backside is too close to the plaza. It looks like more. It feels like I'm on Ventura Boulevard. It's more.
We're looking at.
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
You keep talking to yourself.
And
Miss, if you could just.
Board Member Gallegos, I just wanted to ask, there were no more cards,
There were no other cards, yes.
and there was no one else in the audience that had a desire to speak? Thank you.
Can I continue?
You understood that there was no other talking, right? Okay, great, thank you.
I'm sorry, I just couldn't see.
That's fine.
It's all right.
Thank you.
I think there are some concerns regarding the second story, especially the corner. It's sticking out, the massing. I wish there was some recommendation that you could tone it down maybe to make it less obvious corner. I know how important you want to make, as an architect, you want to make sure that the corner is visible. You want to have a symbolic, you want people to see it, to invite them to the plaza. But for this corner, because you're not totally in the commercial. I know it's Glen Oaks Boulevard, it's progressing into more commercial, newer buildings, more high-end. But this is a little bit too quick of a explosion. I think we need to take it step by step, in my opinion. I wish we could tone it down, the size, and reduce the height maybe. That's the reason I asked the height for the first floor. My mistake was I thought it was 18 feet floor to floor. If there was somehow we could reduce the height and push back that the corner to make it less obvious, because I think a lot of people they're probably going to complain about this two-story building with the neighbors, probably the residential area. And then the alley, you're parking right facing the single little homes, and those homes probably they're like 1,400 square feet homes or 2,000, they're little tiny homes. And it's going to create a lot of traffic because that's the alley, all those cars going to be going and coming. It's going to create a traffic. I don't know how you're going to control that. Those are my two issues. The massing, it's a little bit too massive. The height, I don't know if you could reduce it but a couple of feet. That's not a major. I like the courtyard in the front. I like the two buildings, I think the most bothering is the corner massing. I think it needs to push back and tone it down a little bit.
Okay, we'll go down the side.
That's about it.
Give it a shot. Mrs. Ruffin?
Thank you for your presentations. I think generally I like the general tone of the building. One of my first concerns that I kind of felt about the alley access to the parking is that I wondered if there was a way to access the parking not from the alley but from the side street, so that not everyone has to go to the alley to get to the parking. And if you wish that this will be a very active commercial building, I would imagine that almost on an hourly basis there will be a lot of traffic going back and forth to whether it's a retail need or other needs of the building. So you can imagine how much traffic that alley can have. So that's one thing. And the other thing is that when there's such a big statement on the Glen Oaks side to have a big kind of opening that you connects you to the other side, that you wonder maybe what's going on behind the building, but it's the alley. So I was hoping that somehow the vista looking from Glen Oaks back to the south can be received by maybe a landscape piece that stops that, so you don't kind of look through the two buildings to find someone's home. You know, it kind of becomes such a focal point that you maybe have to find a way of stopping the visual direct access to someone's home. I think the corner. I don't have a big problem with the corner piece. I think maybe it could be softened a bit. Maybe, I don't know. At least on this perspective, it looks kind of jumping at you. But I wonder, this will not be the only perspective that people will see the building. So you experience the building in motion. So it could be that maybe it's because of the perspective that it looks so jumping at you, kind of. But I like the back elevation. I think some of the landscaping comments that the staff have made in their recommendations they're all good comments. I think the building can use some more landscaping on the front portion. I'll let April talk about it further because she's our expert. But I think some shading in the front of the building will help to soften the building edge facing Glen Oaks. And also, I believe maybe the alley could use some of that too, if it's possible. I know the parking is a little bit tight there, but I think some more landscaping will help the building tremendously. Other than that, I think generally it looks like a successful project. The style reminds me, like Mr. Bouladian said, more of Ventura Boulevard than Glen Oaks, but it starts, maybe Glen Oaks will look like Ventura or something. So
Hopefully not.
no, but that's all I have.
Well, I think that my colleagues have made some excellent points, and they have addressed some concerns that I've also had about the design. Overall, I feel that it's a really good design, and it fits in with the character of that area, especially being across the street from two buildings that are more contemporary in nature. So it kind of creates this corridor of contemporary commercial corridor that you're going through. I find it kind of odd that you would pick this perspective, because the end piece jumps out at you and it feels like it's this mass that's going to sit on top of somebody, and you don't really feel like you want to go in that store. So it's maybe just because of perspective, but it does feel like it's a lot of building coming at you. And I know you wanted to have a prominent statement at the corner, but maybe I don't think Glen Oaks is really the street for that. You know, like you said, a tower was one of your considerations. Can you imagine a tower on Glen Oaks Boulevard? There are no towers on Glen Oaks Boulevard, and there's a reason for that. So maybe, I mean, the idea of toning it down or maybe pulling it back in so that it's more, it is in the prominent corner that you want. But the corner, by being a commercial corner, will be prominent in itself. Because across the street, you're not going to have to compete against a tower or a 5-story building or something else that's going to shadow it. Otherwise, I think the massing is fine. The way you've broken the forms is very nice. The different shapes are very nice. And I think Mr. Driffian's comment about the access, the view through the center is a good point. I hadn't really considered that until we had the model presentation. You could see right down the middle, and it reminds me of a project on Ventura Boulevard, actually, that where it's two buildings and you look down the middle and it's the alley and the parking lot. But because their buildings are a lot bigger, you don't really look down the middle. You see the building, not the opening. I don't know if it's going to be a problem here, maybe not. But you have an opportunity, because you have the handicap space here, to maybe if you could lose a space and put a planter there, you could have that access onto landscaping, onto nice planting, which will also address another concern of mine, which is the lack of shading on the southern side of the building. So staff has recommended putting in more planters in the north side, in the courtyard side, which I don't think is really necessary. Like you said, it blocks the view to the building, and I do have a problem with these large street trees that, you know, they start off all fine and cute, and then they get 50 years down the line, which hopefully this building is still there, and they're just massive, and you can't see the signage, you don't know what the building is. So I'm kind of more in favor of keeping it open, and because the building is facing north, the courtyard is protected by the building, maybe putting in some more patio-sized trees for the shading of the patrons who are sitting in that outdoor eating area would be a nice consideration instead. But the shading on the south side, where you are facing the alley, I think would also help you with the residential problem. So the residents aren't looking at this stark, hard surface of windows and stucco and parking and all that stuff. So to soften that edge would also be helpful. And one of staff's recommendations was to do permeable paving, but you can't really do that where the subterranean parking is, but where the above-ground parking is, and along that strip. I think that would be a good idea to do the permeable paving, because it is on grade, and then you won't have as much drainage issues going into your subterranean parking. You won't have all that runoff going down the driveway, which we don't like to do. But within the commercial area where you have the paving, I think the glass impregnated concrete is a nice choice. It's a nice material. Your landscape, you mentioned your landscaping selections were carefully chosen and considered. And looking at your list, a lot of them aren't drought tolerant, and we're in a water shortage in Glendale and water restrictions. So I think maybe if you could reconsider the plants, and I would actually make that a condition to put in drought tolerant plants off the bewaterwise.com website. I also had it's not really a question, it's more as an observation that the front area on your planting plan along Glen Oaks Boulevard is shown as plantable area, and it's from what I can tell, there's no raised planter there. Because you're on deck, there's no way you can really plant on that. So whether you decide to eliminate it, which I think would be nice to have it there, or put a raised planter, a 2-foot raised planter would be a good idea to achieve your planting. So your planter comes like this, and then the little crescent shape that creates between the sidewalk and the planter. This area in front of the planter. You have on the planting plan, right, you've outlined on the planting plan plant materials, but there's no planter shown, right? That's true? Right, so I think you need to put a planter there. because you're on, as you said, it would have to be like a 2-foot-high planter minimum to get some plants to grow in there. And if obviously you go drought tolerant, it'll be easier because you won't need to water them as much, so they can live in a shorter planter. So those are my concerns with the planting. Let's see, was there any other concerns I had? I think the staff recommendation to put a different material on the northeast corner, which is this corner, maybe not metal because of the glare, the reflectivity of metal for people driving on Glen Oaks Boulevard. I'm fine with it being stucco. I think for me the problem is just the massing and this window and this form that's coming, and obviously the signage that's written on top of it. If that could just get pulled back, or maybe, I think it would be fine if you just pulled it back within the lower massing and sort of abandon the idea of this prominent corner that comes at you. But, let's talk about that, I guess. And that's about it.
Also, I have one comment to the architect. While you revisiting the parking, like Mr. Board Member Zarifian said, for the access, you will revisit the access from Highland. Also notice that the trash enclosure you have all the way down, all the way at the end of the parking. It's going to be kind of revisit that issue that you have all the way, that trash enclosure is all the way in the back. I don't know how, yeah, go ahead. I noticed that, I was looking at the plan.
The location of the driveway was carefully discussed with the traffic department. They will not allow us to have any access from Highland, and on Glen Oaks Planning Department would rather have a driveway elsewhere. So you're only left with the alley side that they would allow us to put a driveway.
Okay.
So that's how we achieved it. But we justify it by widening up the alley. We're trying to soften that traffic that's going to be caused by our
How about
business.
your trash area? Do you think that's
The trash
functional?
area
It's going to be hell for all of them.
Companies that they have jeeps that they will go down there.
And the tenants have to go all the way down to.
There will be a trash chute for them to.
They have.
Yeah. It might not be shown there, but they're going to be.
So you are going to provide.
Right, yeah. That could be one of the conditions. But the location of the driveway, that's the best place that we could put it to satisfy the traffic department.
You're going to have, okay, you need, probably going to revise the plans a little bit for the trash chute.
For the trash chute, yes, just a minor. We have a.
Because I'm looking at
This is
it.
a trash area, right?
Yeah, but if you look first,
If you put a shaft away here,
oh, you haven't shown it. Okay,
Right.
so you have to revise.
it's right.
That's fine.
That's fine.
It's internal. Okay, do we have an answer? Okay.
We reviewed the urban design guidelines and combed through them to see if there's anything that focuses on the corner. There is nothing in the guidelines that specifically speaks of addressing a corner or not addressing a corner.
Okay, great. All right, I guess it falls to me. Again, it's one of those situations, especially when you modernism in general. It becomes you look at it almost as a building of itself, in and of itself. And I think the building as it is by itself, I think it works within itself. And I could see why you would want to have the upper element push out there. I think it's a very dramatic element, the way it pushes out on the side. I guess my really question is, does it fit in this location? Which is sort of why we're here. That's otherwise, it would be any building anywhere. So I guess that's really my question, is does that element, is it so out of place that we would ask you to revise it? And for me, I think it's It's a tough line. I guess I'll have to ask everybody else if they believe the same. I do think it's at the point that it could be revisited, only because I think it is fairly that kind of strong architectural element is a little bit out of character with some of the other buildings that are adjacent to it, and I think the rest of the building is done very nicely. And again, I don't necessarily have a problem with it. I just think in this particular location with where it is, I think that's the issue, and that's for me what we're tasked to look at is within it contextually. But the forms I think were nice. I think the way you've done the back is good. All that is fine. I think there is within the vocabulary of the other elevations that you've done. It seems like there could be those horizontal elements that you could bring down onto the first floor that could give you that kind of drama, but wouldn't have the massing impact that has. Because it looks like that one place in West Hollywood. I think it's on Highland and Melrose or something. That new one that went down in there where the Target is in Southern. Yeah, nothing wrong with that. I think it's perfectly fine. I'm just wondering whether it fits in that location, which is what I believe we're tasked to look at. In that standpoint, I would like it to see come back and just focusing on that one element. I think the rest of it is fine. I think it's nicely done. I think the windows, just in sort of small items, I think because you were doing it so flush, especially on the curved elements on the right-hand side there, there's really not a lot of relief to it. And I think, that can give a nice smooth look, but I also think it can give it a sort of a cheap look, like it's almost two-dimensional. It's not a real three-dimensionality to it. So, I could see that's within your prerogative, so I wouldn't make an issue of that. But I just think it could help with a little bit of three-dimensionality to those elements, that everything is so true and flat. I do agree with staff that, I would like to see another material. I think it would be helpful. I think to do a lot of it in paint and stucco, I think would be, I think that's unfortunate. So that's my points. I think it's really, I'm just focused on the corner because I'm just concerned that that it's too much of a change for me. But we'll see whether anybody else on the board salutes or not.
On the same track. One of the things that I can say is that that I almost forgot actually. I felt that this big gesture maybe belongs to a very pedestrian kind of a strip that you, as you walk along different stores or different kind of entities, you then find a relief and becomes a space and you occupy it. But Glen Oaks is not really a pedestrian street, so I think probably the front courtyard can be somewhat smaller. Maybe, I'm just putting this out as a suggestion, and I can show it to you on the plan. If this, instead of addressing the corner, becomes more regular, if you imagine this face kind of addresses the edge of the street, and then you pull this back so that you gain some more space on the back side. So you make this a more regular piece so that the corner doesn't become such a big kind of gesture that you feel like you have to go to the corner almost. Then you might create some sort of a relief here that ends up to a more intimate courtyard. And then this is a very nice element that I thought maybe it's something that could become a bit higher, and that becomes the main piece that provides shading for the whole building almost. So the building is about this big canopy that shades the building. I'm saying this not as a way of changing the building, but I'm putting out as a way of looking at what's the statement that the building is making. Because what is this is saying is that this is something that you'll arrive here and then you'll find your way to go to someplace else, but it's the alley in reality that you're connecting to in a very strong way. But I think I think this gesture could be somewhat more humble, and it could be about this canopy that simply provides shade for the building and become larger. This is a very nice piece, but I think it's kind of lost in the volumes that are kind of trying to, they're much stronger than the shading element. But anyway, I think I just thought that maybe you don't need that big of a front, big crescent. It could become of little parts that in that way it can maybe connect itself to the scale of the rest of Glen Oaks across that face. I mean, I just wanted to share what I was thinking, but not.
I think what one thing you touched on that has a resonance with me a little bit is that I think maybe part of the little element with that is that when you think of borders, like on Brand, with that really great corner element, it is the entrance to the building. That's the way you get into the building. It's telling you this is the entrance, come in here. And in this one, it's not. It's that one units element. And if you really hadn't been to the building, you'd sort of guess where you went in. You'd go to the gap between the buildings. So you sort of haven't played up. I guess, as I'm working through this talking, I guess that's what was a little bit internal in me, is that it is kind of the front, but it's not. It's an architectural projection, but it's not the entrance to the building, like to the rest of the building upstairs and stuff. So it's an interesting projection, but
It doesn't.
I'm not sure what's doing.
I think it's hurting the building design.
Like I said, it's in isolation without where it is. I think you could understand why that element would sweep. I mean, visually, I think that makes sense. I just don't know. When you think about it in context, I'm just not sure it works. So that's just me.
I think if it's in a commercial district where you have a lot of commercial buildings, then you want to stand out, you want to have a presence like that. You need something that just says, here I am.
Not here.
But here we're talking about it's residential, it's kind of commercial, it's a lot of the kind of same going on, big tall trees. It's kind of a quietness to that street that you put this there, and suddenly that quietness is interrupted by this volume and this building that's trying to say a lot of things, which, this building is great somewhere else. Maybe the language it's trying to speak is too much, then what that corner is trying to be more quiet. Then your client was saying you wanted a presence, but it's kind of like you don't really need a presence because you are a two-story commercial building. Across the street is one story, there's a couple of two stories, they're behind trees, you don't see them. Right off the bat, there's no trees. You have a two-story. Like Mr. Garega said, that's not the entrance to the building. It's not the Borders corner entrance. Each retail space on the ground floor has its own, will probably want its own visibility and be its own prominent entrance. I actually like the courtyard. I think that even though Glen Oaks isn't a walkable street, that it kind of becomes a destination. So, you see this and you kind of think, I want to go there and hang out there because there's this nice big open space. With the right mix of
I think you need
retail and coffee shops and whatever else that people want to come and hang out at, that creates a pedestrian area that you can drive to and hopefully from the neighborhood can walk to and utilize. So I think that I'm in favor of using the courtyard. I can see that little you call it fenestration device, brise-soleil on top. I mean, if it was in one of these spaces where you needed to have that presence again of the building saying, look at me, I'm here, it could come out, it could have circles punctuated in it, it could have all kinds of funky materials on it, you could have uplights on it, and have trees going through it, and be really cool. But we don't need that here because, again, it's just Glen Oaks Boulevard. And I don't think that Glen Oaks needs something that has that much flash and style because it is a residential right behind it and residential next to it, and we have one-story buildings across, and they're not that flashy, cool, glitzy. We're not there yet. I guess I'm trying to say. So why put it all in one building?
I agree with the idea of having a kind of nice open space on Glen Oaks. I think it's great. I was just saying that maybe not having the whole thing as big as it is. I think the whole crescent will be used.
That's true.
So it might give other possibilities to maybe help the building pull away from the residential on the backside. And since the entry to the access to the parking from the alleyway is, if it stays the way it is parking, perpendicular parking and the width of the alley, but if you imagine the building moves away, it kind of creates a more generous access to where you would park as an alternative.
idea
You know
pulling
what
it
to think
forward.
about? I think all of us are struggling. I think the design looks nice. I think what my recommendation I think that corner, you need to focus on that corner. You need to soften it. Maybe because of that massing, the window, that massing is too square. The windows, the grids are too squarish. I think maybe because you have this horizontal line, you have this horizontal going, it works fine up to here. Maybe you need to, because this is like a big box sticking out here. Maybe you need to look, maybe going into softening the corner by adding more horizontal type of mullion system, change the design of the mullion maybe, and go over it as make it one piece all glass and a more horizontal type. Maybe that will soften it, and then will make the building look more shorter and more continuous. And maybe that will make a little bit difference, because right now, looking at it, you have this big corner box right there. It looks like a big cubic box. I think that's I know you want a symbolic corner. I understand that, but I think maybe you should change the geometry into more rectangular shape, maybe 2 feet by 8 footers, and make the corner, it makes a more linear horizontal that will psychologically reduce the height of the building. And it will soften that box. I think that's what it needs to be done. And then maybe on the farther end, where you have the curve, you have on the upper, like I agree with Mr. Giragos, it's two-dimensional. Maybe we need to do three-dimensional, maybe by introducing the mullions protruding like an awning-type shading. It gives it kind of more three-dimensional character. I'm talking modern-looking. Yeah. I think by doing that, if you play, I think you'll nail it. I don't have a problem. We talk about the back, you justify the parking in the alley and all that, leave it the way it is. And then adding a third material maybe more, I don't know, that garage, I thought that garage parking sign wall was, I don't know, what's the material on it? Cladding. What color is it? Is it dark brown? Was it copper?
No.
This one. What is that?
That's brushed aluminum.
Oh, that's brushed aluminum.
If you see it on the animation, because it's reflecting its surrounding, it shows
Where?
it as brown.
Brushed
but
aluminum?
It looks like a brick to me.
What's it like?
Just see the animation. I'm just gonna pass by.
Here, this one. What is that one?
Oh, you can't touch the screen.
You can touch the screen?
Can't touch the screen.
Sorry.
Forgot to tell you.
Can we refer to an elevation, please?
East elevation. It's only but it's only the fascia of the eyebrow. It's only the fascia of the eyebrow.
Yeah,
that's
this one.
brushed, right?
It looks like a brick. Yeah, we got it. So you're saying this is clad?
No, just the fascia of the eyebrow.
Oh, that's nice.
The fascia of the
I was
eyebrow.
thinking is if you do this to soften it down with spandrel glass, you leave the framing in the back of the spandrel, it looks more continuous glass, horizontal maybe. And then this will maybe introduce some other material than...
One thing we'll try to wrap it up and get an answer. I think the last element for me, is I think what is so nice about the courtyard. I think the courtyard is great. I'd like you to keep it the same size. I think the fact that it swoops, I think, is great. So I really enjoy that. I think what's happening is that whole corner is going to be a sea of pavement. just a sea of pavement. And I'm wondering if there is a way of generating a planter or something out in the corner that also might help soften or integrate some way that corner works. It might be another place to sit toward the entrance. So that'd be another sort of element it'd be great to have you think about. There's some way of integrating a little bit at that corner. Because I think it's a lot of... Right, because when you add in the sidewalk with the area behind, it's going to be a big chunk of concrete, just with nothing else happening. And then also you're doing a very two-dimensional facade, which again, whether you do or not, whatever, it's going to be very two-dimensional with all this plaster, with all the concrete. It's going to be very hard at that corner, I think, and not happy.
It kind of reminds me when I go to like outlet malls that you take the green element on the right-hand side, which is that vertical piece, and take that and put that on the left-hand side, but smaller. So that becomes your corner element. So that you have this kind of like giant window space entrance, right? Over here, this gets cut off, or maybe it continues, and somehow it gets tied together with the corner piece there. It's grounded. So then you can put an awning on it, you can kind of dress it up, and you can put planters in front of it, so it creates more of a texture and relief on this edge, and more of a grounding to it. You can put things that kind of integrate quite a lot.
Because I think the definition that you're getting in the courtyard, you could do elements like that near that corner that could be supportive. So.
But, by doing that, wouldn't that make it more massive? And isn't that what we're trying to
I think it's the upper floor projecting out,
Makes
big two-floor
heavy.
piece sticking out. That's the issue.
Well, one of our objectives was to create a drama, whether to attract
Right.
attention. One thing that you pointed out, that the perspective, it is a most dramatic view of
Yeah,
that.
it's way bigger.
But if you watch the animation, you realize that the whole thing
Yeah.
is not as massive and as dramatic. So, and as you approach the...
We normally don't let have a talk back during our discussion, but I'll let you go.
Okay.
That's
I
fine.
think it
Thank
just
you.
feels it's because it's so much bigger than the first floor. I mean, especially with this elevation, the top part is 2/3 the size and the bottom is 1/3 the size. It makes the bottom
It looks
feel
vertical.
like it's
square
trying to
vertical.
squash it down, and that it's just heavy
Looks
on top
squarish.
of it.
It looks squarish
So that's why I
vertical.
think maybe you could take the other element on the other side and put it on this side, but not as big. Like I wouldn't do it this high. I wouldn't say put this over here, because obviously then you're going to have an even bigger element. Maybe like take this proportions and put it here and make this glass come up to create an entrance area so that it's just framing it.
No, I think actually the two sides, they don't probably want to be
They don't wanna
similar.
match.
Yeah. I think you've taken the right step. It's just a matter of finding a more humble statement than, as I said, maybe the perspective is somewhat letting us focus on
You
it too
picked it at
much.
the exact spot to overemphasize it.
Yeah.
No, he picked
But
the
I
right corner.
Well, I was
Picked
thinking
the
that
right
you just-
perspective to be criticized.
Okay,
That's
we need a
what it
motion.
is.
We need to go.
It's your choice. You picked that corner.
Yeah, turn it over.
No, that doesn't help.
That doesn't help. Okay, I need a motion.
Actually, if you picked this one, you probably wouldn't have.
I think probably the staff has to read some of the...
Yeah, I think we'd like to ask you a few questions. Because we've heard from some of the from most of the board members, staff is getting a sense that there's an overall appreciation for the design, but there's a discomfort with some of the elements. And I'm not going to make a whole list right now. I'm going to hit just a few key points. Obviously, there's been a lot of discussion about the corner and the massing at the corner, but not necessarily the overall massing. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. There is a sense that there could be a more substantial buffer towards the residential. And there is a sense, I think we heard some overall agreement that additional landscaping in a number of areas would be beneficial to the project. Would you say that those are the three key points?
Yes.
Yes.
Architecturally, the corner element is when we look at the plan, that element projects 5.5 feet, which is a substantial projection. So a couple of questions that we have for you. Now, let me back up for just a moment. Board Member Zarifian offered some suggestions that would really require the applicant to essentially rethink the entire partie gestalt of the project, which I'm not necessarily hearing a consensus for that.
I don't know for that. I'm not.
Okay.
No, even I didn't mean to say that this needs to change. I was just saying that maybe there could be something that can be considered in terms of whether the project needs as big as a court in front or not. So that might suggest or provide some other avenues to deal with the corner.
Right.
But that
And
was more the comment. Kind
more
of
a suggestion of not necessarily this is very important, but this might be a tool you can consider.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
Okay with the Gestalt.
We're okay.
okay, great. So a couple of things that we want to put forward to you. One is 5.5 feet, pretty substantial cantilever. If it was a 2-foot cantilever with modifications to the fenestration, as Board Member Baladian was mentioning, so it became more horizontal, because it does appear fairly massive because of the large openings there. If that were not to be a cantilever, because one of the things that as staff we've noticed, as that curvilinear form on the second floor, on that piece on the east side, comes around, the way that it distinguishes itself from the ground floor is with that change in plane. If there wasn't a change in plane at the corner, that reading of the two different forms would get a little bit muddy. So one of the things we heard from Board Member Sakai is the potential of treating it more similarly to the west side, which would essentially bring it down, still have it in a different plane, but bring it down to the ground. So it seems like, I guess the question is, A, if it were simply a 2.5 foot cantilever, would that reduce the impact that you're struggling with? And B, would there be a preference to bring it down to the ground and have it treated more similarly to the west side?
I think I also would be in favor of just chopping it back beyond the lower floor so that it sort of stepped in.
Okay.
Because I think for me, just having a 2.5 foot cantilever or a 1 foot cantilever, you still see this mass.
Okay.
Whether it has windows in it or it's all stucco, which I think is worse, would be an issue.
I realized something that I was trying to find it and say it. I think what happens is that this building, on the east side especially, somewhat the west side too, but the east side definitely has a base, and what happens is that the mass on top of the base is as heavy and as overpowering as the base itself. So my suggestion about the canopy and that as a light element was about really making the top, what goes on top, lighter.
Okay.
As a general direction. I think the base and everything looks successful, but the canopy is the beginning of suggesting something that hovers over the base, and then maybe you turn what happens between the canopy and the base to all glass, because especially it's the north side. So that will really lighten up the building. I think the building has a bit of a heavy hand on this end of it, and it kind of doesn't help it.
Okay, so lightening the second story so that it does seem lighter and not quite as heavy as the ground floor. And I guess as we craft conditions, the board members could either toss out a number of options, or and one of the things that is obviously for you to decide, if your comments necessitate another review by the board, or if there's a possibility of giving specific guidance to the applicant and to staff so that we can carry out your wishes in an expedited
Maybe
manner.
I can say something. I don't know if it might help the direction. I think the building is starting to break the masses down, and as soon as it's kind of starting to do that, by projecting this volume, it still becomes the same two-story building. So I think if you let the base to be the base, and then you put something on top of it, it will really start to step the building and help the massing to be more to the scale of the surrounding. I think that's the problem with the east end.
I think
It pushes the building right back to a two-story building.
If there is consensus on that point, because it does seem the corner is the main struggle in regards to the massing, if there is consensus on that point, we're just offering that with proper guidance, and we would just ask you a couple more questions to make sure that we've got it right. We could work with the applicant on that.
I mean, the thing is about the corner, it's too heavy, and beside all what we talked about it, I mean, at first when we looked at it, my point was soften it down and push it back to break. Then looking at it, and looking at how I could solve this problem, because I kind of like the cantilever, I don't have problem cantilevering that box out. It feels like the sculpture, this whole project was a big stone, the sculptor starts sculpting the building, and then he got to the end, he hasn't finished it yet. So that end part hasn't been finished yet. So you haven't sculpted it yet. So it's still a pure box. So you have too many options. It's not something, if you give a guidance that you guys could look at and work. I think you could have an option to leave the cantilever out, present maybe a horizontal type of winding to softening that box, or if you decide, maybe push it back, and then also introduce a horizontal windows by playing with a two different plane. I mean, you're the architect. I mean, you need to spend some time maybe to come up maybe 2-3 options with your client and come up with the best solution. That corner, it is symbolic, at the same time not, giving you that look that it's a boxy. It's your baby to figure it out how you could soften it.
What's the board's preference? Do you want to do like
I think
see
it
it
needs
again?
to come back.
Like see it again?
Yeah.
Like see it again?
The what?
Okay, I think we want to see it again.
I think we
wanna
need to see it again, the corner.
Okay, with that, somebody want to construct a motion?
What's Stephanie's? What's your sense in terms of
Well,
the ability to?
what would be really helpful in this case is if we could take about a 7 to 10 minute break. That would be helpful to us to craft some conditions. And
I think it's very much focused. I mean, I think we're in consensus on 80% of the building. So for me, I think it's very much that piece right there. So I'm not. It sounds much worse than it is, I think, when you say back for redesign.
But my question was that what's your sense in terms of asking for redesign versus, do you think
I'm not
you
a
can-
board member, so I'll leave that to you.
But what I'm saying is that based on your experience in terms of the ability to carry on the kind of comments that we have made, does that kind of give you enough to move on, or?
Well, In our view, again, if we took a break, and in either case, I think we would want to take a bit of a break to craft conditions so we would really know that we feel confident we have the sense of the board. Then we would have a level of confidence. We've had great success in working with this applicant team. The project was very different when it had first come to us. So with either, if we either decide to give the applicant a number of options to explore, or if you say, we do all agree that bringing the second floor back, because we're hearing a consensus from the board that at that corner, bringing that second floor back, stepping it back more similarly to it where it is in plan on the arc. There are probably lots of different options.
Maybe. We're not saying that pull it back. It's his call.
Well, let's just take a break and see how we come out.
Okay.
We're not saying that pull it back.
Okay.
We're saying that.
Well, let's take a break and see what.
A couple of other comments that we'd like to make, because staff sits in all of the meetings from Board 1 and 2. And we're familiar not only with commercial projects that have been built on Glen Oaks, but others that have come forward and have met with great, a positive reception from the boards that maybe haven't been built yet or are stalled for some reason. What we see is that Glen Oaks is becoming, is filling out, maybe not to its maximum envelope, but filling out to become different than what it is today, more pedestrian-oriented, a more vibrant commercial area. That's what we see because of the projects that there are a couple of projects that have been built already. One actually by the same developer, not exactly the same team, but the same developer, and others that have come forward and not proceeded. So we just wanted to put that out there because that's a view that as staff, since we do see all the projects that come to the city, whether they get built or not, and board members don't necessarily have that view, wanted to share that with you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Let's take a 7-minute break and see how it rolls out.
have mine since '93.
Okay.
Okay. Mr. Guerreros, I think we're on.
Are we live?
All right.
We are back live. Welcome back. You've had our chance to look and think, and I will hand it over to Joe Stephanie, please. Joe Stephanie.
Thanks to the board for allowing us to craft some language that hopefully you can all live with, and thanks to the applicants and the public for your patience. So here's what we have so far. Jump in at any time. What we have for the corner element is the corner element should be modified to reduce the apparent scale, potentially step the building back or reduce the projection of the second floor, or bring the second floor down to the ground to be more similar to the treatment on the west end. Next condition. Review fenestration and secondary elements to provide the apparent scale of the second floor at the east end. The second floor should be lighter in appearance than the ground floor or base. Consider modifying the fenestration at the corner element to have a more horizontal reading, with the potential to provide additional horizontal elements, sunshade, canopy, etc. Next condition, which is also related, the second floor curved element on the east side of the building should also appear lighter, potentially enhance the canopy element and modify and/or increase the glazing. That was supposed to speak to the concern that the base looked about as heavy as the second floor, and that's to address...
Vice versa. Actually, the second floor looked as heavy as the...
Right, and that the second floor, even in the area that arcs away from the corner, should also be lighter. So we can, if we've gotten that right, we can clarify the language on that, but we don't have to do it right now. Push at least a portion of the building closer to Glen Oaks Boulevard to provide greater area for a buffer at the rear. Provide landscaping at the south side of the slot between the two main building forms to serve as a buffer to the residential. And then the next condition is the entire project and project site will benefit by more landscaping. Provide landscaping at the northeast corner. Extend the curvilinear planter to the property line at Glen Oaks Boulevard as shown on the landscape plan. Provide additional landscaping at the alley side to serve as a buffer to the adjacent residential properties and to provide shade to the south side of the building. Provide smaller trees at the north open space for shade. All planters shall have a minimum depth of 24 inches of soil, 36 inches where trees are planted.
I'd like to add that I think that the front, if you enlarge the front planter along Glen Oaks Boulevard, that it would seem too massive and you'd get away from the curvilinear shape. So just possibly adding in another planter that's lower than the...
Okay. Okay, so rather than extend the curvilinear planter, add a planter.
Add a lower planter. Or actually it could be a higher planter. I guess it doesn't really matter however you want to address your
courtyard space. Well, a higher planter would prevent that openness that you also discussed. Okay.
It doesn't.
So provide a planter of a different height.
Correct. I mean, I don't think is there a planter heights on here? No. So we've given you 24 and 36, and where you decide you want it up and down, that's for the applicant to decide.
Okay. And then we heard a number of comments regarding the flatness of the wall, especially the wall at the north and east side. Was there a desire to condition at least a minimal recess of those windows, or...
I would like to see it. I don't know how you guys feel.
Too.
Not in general, but it has to have some sort of reason. Maybe the base if the base is flush and more volumetric, maybe the top can start to recess and lighten up. It's a discretionary kind of.
So it's not something you could make
It's not-
a specific formulaic kind of condition.
It's
So
not trying to say that all of the windows should be deeper. It has to have some sort of a reason, but definitely helping the building to lighten up or be heavier at the base, whichever makes sense. But there should be a reason for doing one or the other.
I think the issue for me was I think if you look at the perspectives, like the rear perspective, the windows are recessed, and even just that much that you have on the back, I think helps. Because I think what was getting me was the curve, the quarter turn that's on the upper side. It's so two-dimensional for I don't know what reason. When there's so much interest everywhere else,
So provide a three-dimensional sense to some of the surfaces on the north side. Provide recessed windows in some areas that enhance the feeling of the base and a lighter top. Okay, I'm seeing nods. Okay, and then, excuse me while I grab the staff report. There were a number of conditions that staff provided that we heard some agreement with, so I'm just going to read them. Number 1 in the staff report, submit lighting details for review and approval by staff prior to building plan check submittal. Number 4, the paving shall be decorative, obviously not permeable. That was a mistake on my part, I have to admit. Subject to the approval of planning staff. Number 5, submit an updated landscape plan with drought-tolerant palette of trees and plants. Number 6, all planners shall utilize drip irrigation in an effort to minimize water consumption. 7, the driveway leading to subterranean parking garage shall be decorative. 8, provided an additional material, metal or other panel system in place of the stucco at the northeast corner of the building. Now, that suggestion was really to vary the materials so that not all the materials, or almost all the materials, especially on the north side, would be stucco. We did hear some general agreement with that condition, but we just wanted to check in with you. So provide a material that's not stucco on one or other of the forms as it architecturally enhances the design of the building.
Bother me.
Is that, it doesn't bother you the way it is now?
Just stucco. Well, they have stucco and the brick,
Right.
so I just think that metal.
So you don't
on
think,
that corner would be.
even if it was a brushed or painted metal panel?
But it doesn't speak to me as saying that needs to happen.
Okay.
I think that kind of a material probably won't help to, so to speak, soften the building.
Right.
It's still kind of.
Well, we were just suggesting some other material. If the board doesn't agree with that, we won't include it.
Do you
No,
guys care?
I don't think it's necessary to
Okay.
have another material.
And then number 9, locate all equipment, et cetera, and we'll include the trash enclosure and trash chute in that condition.
Yeah, one comment that the first set of conditions, I think there were 3 options for the northeast corner.
Yes.
I think the last one was making. Sorry,
I'm sorry. That's terrible. I shouldn't have been doing that.
the last one was to make the northeast corner similar to the west end.
Right.
I think if the first 2 are direction that it's coming from us, then the last one is totally contradictory to that. It might make it kind of more.
Massive.
It's harder to follow. I mean, if you take the last one, then the first 2 are not valid comments. You know what I'm
Okay.
saying?
That was something we heard from Board Member Sakai, so...
That because we said that the top is too heavy.
Yeah.
And so to get that volume back, but to create a corner presence, to
Yeah.
kind of create another kind of entry focus point.
Yeah.
And then by grounding it, you kind of create more of a base for the lower building. But it doesn't have to be that.
Yeah, I thought the comment read making it similar to the west end, which
Says,
yeah.
the way that we've read it
Alternative.
back to you, and obviously these are your conditions, or bring the second floor down to the ground floor to be more similar to the treatment at the west end.
no, I think personally think that will be contrary to letting the base be a base and the second floor be a second floor and lighter and everything that we say, if we bring the second floor down to the ground, it will be contrary to the first things that we were saying.
Because it's not lighter, but I was actually kind of suggesting that would get cut back, and then that piece would just get put on the
No, if you
front.
cut it back, then it can't come to the ground.
Right,
No,
that
cutting
wasn't-
back is good.
Right,
but-
I wasn't saying that we should come down, like wrap around the building. That it should just be behind a element of similar nature to the
Yeah, I don't.
west.
I don't.
He doesn't like.
No, I don't know.
Okay, so if you'd like, we could say potentially step the building back or reduce the projection of the second floor. Does that seem to be what, are we reflecting correctly what the
Yeah.
board has
Yeah,
said?
I'm just trying to say that maybe there are so many. I heard so many things I can't remember. I rather maybe see, because the majority of the project we're in favor of, if we can reduce and distill the comments to 3 very strong points, or 4 or 5, but they're different points and very clean and simple. I would think that it will be easier to follow. Or am I?
And I think you had an interesting drawing up here where the front of the building continues forward and kind of cuts the plan of the bottom,
Yeah,
but
just,
the mass
again, I
gets
don't want to
pushed
be
back.
designing these, it's for someone else to do, but just, if it was that he thought of that as a element, pulling around, that came out the front, so you still could have this front wall pull through, and then this all could be back.
So
So you
that
saw
it's
a
not
blade,
a
kind
mass.
of that's a blade
So I think there's a
coming
lot of
through.
options that you can.
And then he might do your
suggest.
brise soleil pulling into the side of it, you know? So,
If you
Let's-
take this
Yeah,
wall,
what are you talking about?
that wall,
So
we were talking like this wall, you have like a layer, comes out and finish there, and then you pull back the back,
right, and then this pulls back,
it
and
becomes a
then
thin wall, like a thin layer,
blade, yeah.
like a offset,
And then the brise soleil can pull
I
into the
think
side.
maybe
of
we
it.
should
Yeah,
let,
yeah, exactly, that's-
let's focus on the comments because we're trying to have some.
Okay,
I think it's
so, so how about if we say, if the entire board is in agreement that the base should look stronger and heavier than the top element, then we could give that direction, and another option that achieves that they can work that out, because it takes a little more time than we
Yeah,
have in the
let
meeting.
them work through it. They know I think they know the intent of what we're talking about.
Okay.
Is it unorthodox to ask them to come back with just solutions to that corner? Like if they said, well, we want to have 3 solutions instead of just presenting one thing at our next review, so that we can comment on the direction?
I don't know if they usually don't.
You want to just have one?
They usually want one.
Just one, okay.
Yeah, I've been that road. Okay, let's, is that a motion? Is that, somebody made a motion? Does that work for all of us?
There hasn't been a motion quite yet.
Could that be part of someone's motion? Anybody want to make a motion?
What are we doing?
We say
the
we
things
just
she
have to motion to approve with conditions and considerations.
Motion to approve.
Maybe a redesign.
To,
Either back or
to approve,
redesign.
no, sorry.
Are we approving it, or are we come back and redesign?
To have the written for redesign with conditions and considerations.
Okay, is there a second?
I second it.
This will be roll call. Mr. Beladian?
Yes.
Mr. McCann's gone. Ms. Sakai,
Yes.
Mr. Zarifian,
Yes.
and Mr. Garagos.
Yes.
Motion carries on 4-0 as a return for redesign per the conditions that were spelled out by staff.
Okay, thank you very much.
Great. The next thing on our agenda are the approval of minutes, and actually, since Mr. Malikian is not here this evening, we cannot approve the August 13th or August 27th minutes, but we do have the ability to approve the September 10th
September
minutes.
10th. Has everybody read these yet? You want to read it?
The last meeting.
Just take a moment for everybody to review it, and we'll vote on it.
We'll take a 7-minute break. No.
That was more than 7 minutes.
We were timing you guys.
I'm just scaring you.
This is the famous house.
Stephanie, while they're reading, can you tell us a little bit of what happened at this council meeting on any of the...
Oh, thank you for asking. The council meeting on Tuesday, the item for the windows that was agendized was put off, continued to a date not certain. So that will be renoticed as a study session. That will be 2 issues, because if you did read the staff report, there were 2 issues, one of enforcement, essentially, and one of design that included draft design guidelines. And that will move forward at a date unknown, likely during the day in a study session. And then October 20th will be the report to council regarding the recommendations that you've made on the DRB process.
Okay. Thank you. Is everybody good? Anybody want to make a motion for the minutes for September 10th?
What's the date?
Are we good? Everybody okay with it? Any
yeah.
comments?
No. Motion to approve the minutes for September 10th meeting.
Is there a second?
I second.
Okay, a roll call to approve the minutes of September 10th of this year. Mr. Zarifian.
Yes.
Mr. Baladian.
Yes.
Ms. Sakai.
Yes.
And Mr. Garagos.
Yes.
Motion 4-0. Thank you.
And with that, a very long and circuitous meeting is adjourned.
For one item.